What is up, guys? Stark here. In today's video I am doing a character spotlight for a servant over on Japan. Now I know I don't usually do the characters that are on Japan, but this one is a newly released character, and you know, I'm a huge fan of Greek mythology, and so I decided to why not go ahead and make a character spotlight for this character. And this character in question is going to be Ares. So Ares is the god of war, and you know, he is one of my favorite gods from Greek mythology. So like I said, I decided to go ahead and make a character spotlight for him. Brand new servant, so some of the images are going to be just whatever I could find, really, because obviously the servant just came out, so I really didn't have the ability or the access to get all of the images I needed, but I made do with what I had and what I could find. So yeah, he is a berserker, 5-star berserker, and at level 90 he will go up to 12,788 HP, and he will have 12,829 attack. This will rank him 83rd overall in HP and 2nd overall in attack. And then for his Grail stats, he will end up with 13,918 HP and 14,049 attack. So he's got some really good attack stats. He's got some average HP stats. Obviously, you know, 83rd isn't too high, but when you look at how many characters there are, 240, you know, he still does a pretty good number there, and he still has a pretty good amount of HP. He is a berserker though, so he will fall a little bit easier in battle. His star absorption is 9, his star generation is 4.9%, and his null phantasm generation for his attacks will be 1.58, and on his defense it'll be 5%. So he's got some pretty lackluster star generation, but he's got some pretty good null phantasm generation actually. Overall though, seems like a pretty good servant, pretty solid set of stats. So speaking of his skills, his first skill is going to be the Rage of Sparta. And what this will do is it will charge your own Noble Phantasm gauge. This will also increase his own Noble Phantasm damage for 3 turns, and it will also increase his own Buster Card effectiveness for 3 turns. So this skill is pretty deadly from the looks of it here. You can get a whole lot out of it. You'll be able to charge up to 50% of your gauge at level 10 with a 50% increase to Noble Phantasm damage for 3 turns, and you'll also be able to get a 20% increase to your Buster Card effectiveness on a 6-turn charge time at maximum level. So this skill is really good. It's going to be able to push out a ton of damage and be able to get your Noble Phantasm off pretty quickly and do some extra damage while you're doing that. Moving on to his second skill, this is going to be the Battle Continuation A++, and this one is actually a really unique skill. I don't think any other character in the game currently has a skill like this. And what it does, it will grant him guts 1 time over the course of 5 turns, and it will also make it so that for 1 turn he will only get his Buster Cards. So that's really unique. You know, you'll be able to use that, and you're guaranteed to get Buster Cards on this character. So if you get 3 cards with Ares, you're going to get 3 Buster Cards, and he does have 3 Buster Cards, you know, spoiler. But then you'll be able to make Buster Brave Chains and do some pretty good damage. But the really cool thing about this is, if you have 3 Buster Cards already, and then you use this skill, you could still get those 3 Buster Cards. So you can actually get 2 turns back to back of being able to do Buster Brave Chains with Ares. And he's got some pretty strong skills. You know, you can combo that in with his first skill, being able to get that Buster Card increase for 3 turns. You could basically make use of that and get 2 of those 3 turns to be pure Buster Cards, and that's going to do a ton of damage overall. And he also does get the guts there as well, being able to revive with 2,500 HP at level 10 on a 6-turn charge time. So this one's going to be a pretty good skill. You just have to make sure that you use it in the right situations. You know, sometimes you are going to have to use it to get the gut skill, and you're not going to be able to make too much use of the Buster Cards. But you know, overall, I don't think there's going to be too many problems with that. You should always benefit from getting Buster Cards, and the guts, you know, it lasts 5 turns as well, so you should be pretty good there. And now for his third and final skill, it's going to be the Charisma of the Gods, and this one will increase your party's attack for 3 turns, and this will also increase Ares' own attack by 10% for each enemy defeated for 1 turn. So this is another really good skill. He seems to have a kit, you know, made purely for damage, and that's pretty awesome there. He is the god of war, so it makes sense. So you get a 20% increase to your entire team for 3 turns on a 5-turn charge time. But the interesting thing in this skill is the second part, being able to increase his own attack by 10% for each enemy defeated. So you want to make sure that Ares is the one that's going to land the killing blows on whichever enemies you're fighting. you know, that can count for your normal wave mobs or even mini bosses or whatever. So all of that will get, you know, counted into this, and then every time you use it, you get an extra 10% bonus for each enemy. So that could be some pretty good damage there. If you go into longer fights with multiple enemies in a wave, you could just sit there and stall, I guess, with Ares and just keep pummeling them and get this, you know, stacked up pretty high. Now you do have to be careful. He is a berserker, so he can fall pretty quickly, and you know, outside of that guts, he doesn't have too much as far as defense goes. So you do have to be careful with that, but it can amount to some pretty serious damage there. So moving on to his passives. He has two, the first one being the Madness Enhancement B, which will increase his Buster Card effectiveness by 8%, and the second one is going to be the Divinity A, which will apply damage plus 200 to him. Moving on to his Ascension. For his first Ascension, you are going to need 5 Berserker pieces and 100,000 Quantum pieces. For his second Ascension, you're going to need 12 Berserker pieces, 6 Ring of Giants, and 300,000 Quantum pieces. For his third Ascension, you will need 5 Berserker Monuments, 29 Chains of Fool, 3 Tearstones of Blood, and 1 million Quantum pieces. And then for his fourth and final Ascension, you will need 12 Berserker Monuments, 6 Tearstones of Blood, 5 Warhorses Young Horns, and 3 million Quantum pieces. As for his skill enhancements, to max out a skill from 1 to 10, you are going to need 17 Gems of Berserker, 17 Magic Gems of Berserker, 17 Secret Gems of Berserker, 42 Reactive Gunpowder, 18 Ring of Giants, 23 Phoenix Feathers, 15 Tearstones of Blood, 1 Crystallized Lore, and 54,400,000 Quantum pieces. As for the order in which you want to max out his skills, I would definitely say Rage of Sparta is the one you want to max out the most, or first. You know, you get a whole bunch of different effects with this one, and they're all really good, and you can get them up to like 50% for the Noble Phantasm Gauge filled. So you definitely want to do that, but the other two skills you don't really have to worry about too much because they don't have a whole lot of, you know, increase as they go up the levels. So for his second skill, I guess would be second, or actually no, go with Charisma of the Gods second because you get that extra attack bonus for the 20%, and then Battle Continuation would be last because, you know, the Guts HP isn't really a huge factor, and you still get the Buster Cards locked in there for one turn regardless of the level. And for Charisma of the Gods, you still get that extra attack bonus for each enemy defeated, so that doesn't play into the level at all. So I would say Rage of Sparta, Charisma of the Gods, and Battle Continuation A++ in that order. That's just my recommendation though. Moving on to his command cards and his Noble Phantasm. For his command card deck, he's going to have 1 Quick, 1 Arts, and 3 Buster, and the hit counts on those are going to be 1 for the Quick, 6 on his Arts, which is really good, 3 on his Buster cards, which is also pretty good, and then 4 on his extra attack. So he's got some really good hit counts there, comboed in with a very, very good Noble Phantasm generation on his attack, and this will definitely allow him to get some pretty good Noble Phantasm generation going, considering he doesn't have any sort of skills to increase his overall generation. He does have his first skill to increase his gauge, but he doesn't have anything after that for sustainability, but he does have really good hit counts and really good Noble Phantasm generation, so he should be able to use his Noble Phantasm pretty often. You know, you do need a little bit of support there for that. As for his Noble Phantasm, it is going to be a Buster card, which will deal damage to a single enemy, and he'll also become invincible for 1 turn. And then on the Overcharge effect, it will deal bonus hits and extra damage for each enemy killed. So this kind of plays into his third skill, where he gets stronger the more enemies he kills, and you know, I guess each time he kills an enemy, he'll get an extra hit on his Noble Phantasm, so he'll do a lot more damage there, you know, depending on how many enemies you kill. So you could do some pretty wild damage with this character. Moving on now to his craft essences that you could use. First up for his maximum bond craft essence is going to unlock the War Chariot, which while equipped will increase Buster card effectiveness of all of your allies by 20%, but it will also decrease their debuff resistance by 20%. So this is pretty generic, you know, get that increased Buster card effectiveness, but you get that negative effect with this one being the debuff resistance. So, you know, not a bad one, but probably not going to use it. Some other good options will be the Holy Night Supper, and this will let you start the battle with 30% of your gauge filled and increase your critical damage and Noble Phantasm damage by 10% each. And then on the maximum limit break, you'll get a 15% increase to your critical damage and Noble Phantasm damage, and you'll also start the battle with 50% of your gauge filled. So this one's pretty good, being able to start with 50% of your gauge filled. You could do that and then combo it with his first skill if it's maxed out to get an instant Noble Phantasm. and then you can use that to kill some enemies and, you know, make your attack stronger in the future. So this is really cool. You get a whole lot of payoff for using your Noble Phantasm and getting those kills, and each time you use it, it's just going to get stronger and stronger. So that's really cool. He doesn't do a whole lot of crits. He has no way of really getting crits. His star absorption is really low. He can generate stars pretty well with, you know, his star absorption as high as hit counts, but he's not going to be able to get them. So the crit damage isn't really a huge factor, but you do also get a huge boost to your Noble Phantasm damage as well. So overall, a pretty good one there. Next up is the Volume In Hydrogarium, and this will apply invincibility to him for 3 attacks, and also apply damage plus 200 or 500 on the max limit break. So this one's nice. It's typically a good one for berserkers who fall pretty easily in battle, being able to tank those 3 hits and deal a little bit of extra damage as you go. And finally, we have the limited 0 over for the increase to your Buster Card effectiveness of 25% or 30% on the max limit break. So now moving on to some of the characters that you can combo Ares with, and first up is going to be Mash. Now she's in there, you know, as always, being able to provide a whole bunch of defense to Ares. You know, he is a berserker. He doesn't have a whole lot of defense. He's purely focused on offense, and Mash will definitely be able to provide some sort of defensive support for him, being able to increase his defense, and she can also increase his attack as well as make him invincible as well. So definitely some good options there for that. Next up is going to be the Santa Quetzalcoatl. She is going to be very effective, being able to increase her party's attack, and she also has the ability to increase his star absorption rate. So this is a pretty unique skill. Not a lot of characters have the ability to grant another character the option of increasing their critical absorption rate, and so you could use this to use it on Ares and increase his star absorption rate to make him be able to do crits, which will make him do even more damage and kill more enemies, and that'll further increase his 3rd skill and his own Noble Phantasm. So, you know, it's a pretty good combination there. Next up, we have Brynhild for pretty much the same reason. She's able to increase the star absorption of Ares. And then she can also increase the damage he does as well, and recover his HP if he does take, you know, a few too many hits. So yeah, pretty good combination there. And finally, we have Merlin. You know, who else? Merlin is the go-to guy for berserkers and buster cards. So he, I mean, I've said everything I need to say about Merlin. He's just overall, he's just a fantastic servant. As for the overall star rankings, for his stats, he's gonna get 5 stars. You know, he ranks top 2 in attack. That alone is pretty much enough to give him 5 stars. And he is in the upper half of HP as well. So yeah, I think that's pretty justified. For his skill rankings, I do give him 4.5 out of 5. He has a tremendously powerful offensive set of skills, and really he can do a ton of damage, a ton of good things there. So I really can't knock it too much there. But you know, there are a few flaws to it. He doesn't have a whole lot as far as crits or Noble Phantasm generation outside of that flat gain to his gauge. So he does struggle a little bit in getting critical stars and increasing his generation. So he's not really helpful in shorter fights, and I guess I'll talk a little bit more about that with versatility. So moving on to Noble Phantasm, he's going to get 4.5 stars here. This is primarily because you do have to kill enemies to increase the amount of damage it does, and you know, with his lack of Noble Phantasm generation outside of his hits, it's going to be somewhat difficult in order to spam his Noble Phantasm, so you probably won't be able to get it too high for that damage threshold unless you're in a longer fight. So it does lose, you know, half a point there, but overall it can do some really good damage, and you do get invincibility for 1 turn as well every time you use it. So that's a really good trade-off. So yeah. For his survivability, he will get 4 stars. He does have that 1 gut skill, and his Noble Phantasm, you know, is able to grant him invincibility, but he is still a berserker, and he still will fall really fast in battle, especially if he is focus fired. So you do have to watch out for that, and you know, he does lose a few points there. You know, his Noble Phantasm is pretty difficult to completely spam. You could get it off once or twice, but after that it's going to be somewhat of a struggle, and you could find yourself in some pretty sticky situations. But he does have some pretty good survivability, especially for a berserker, so 4 stars. And he does also get 4 stars for versatility. He is a pretty selfish servant. He does have that charisma that will increase the attack of all allies, but outside of that, he does pretty much only buff himself. He's really good at doing that though, but he does kind of tend to be used more in longer fights, it seems, being able to get stronger as he kills more enemies. If you are in a shorter fight, he's not going to be able to reach his maximum damage threshold. So, you know, you might want to substitute him for someone else who can do more burst damage. But in the long runs, in the long fights, he's definitely going to be a good option, especially if there are multiple enemies in the same wave. Then you can go ahead and just focus fire those enemies down with Ares, get a ton of attack stacks, and then use your Noble Phantasmal on the boss and just do a ton of damage to him overall. And that will give his overall ranking a 4.5 out of 5. He seems to be a very, very good servant, and not much else to say. He is the God of War. He will do a ton of damage, and I think overall he is a very powerful servant, and he's pretty balanced too, from what it looks like. But, you know, he is new, so we kind of have to play around with him a little bit, and I cannot wait for this character to come out on Global. So that's going to wrap up this character spotlight, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. Let me know if you want me to do more character spotlights for new characters that get released onto Japan before they come out on Global. Maybe I can make like a first look impression of the character when they first come out, and then make a proper spotlight for those characters later as they do make their way onto the global servers. Because usually it'll be a few years before those characters are even released for us. And, you know, a lot of things can change between now and then. So it might be a good idea to do that. Get some extra content, extra viewers to take a look at those characters and see what's coming, you know, for those global only players. But yeah, that's gonna wrap up this video. As always, I have the links below to my Twitter, Twitch, Patreon, and Discord, so feel free to check those out. And thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.